housekeeping and arrangements, let us now welcome Professor HENRIOT to give us the first presentation of the afternoon sessions. And let me introduce Professor HENRIOT. He is the Professor of Modern Chinese History at Aix-Marseille University, Department of Asian Studies. He was graduated from Stanford University, Sorbonne Nouvelle University, and EHESS. And he is the co-founder of the European Journal of East Asian Studies. He has edited the first 7 volumes of it. He has taught as a visiting professor at various American universities, and he received fellowships from Stanford, from the Humboldt Research Award, and he has authored many, many books, including Prostitution and Sexuality in China in 19th to 20th centuries, and also this one that I happen to have in my office, in Chinese translation. And he is currently the PI of an ERC grant, which runs from 2018 to 23 on elites in modern China. And I personally have heard a lot of great things about the project. And the co-author of his presentation is Cécile ARMAND, who is currently a postdoctoral researcher in this ERC project, Elites, Networks, and Power in Modern China. And she is also in a Zoom session right now. Before coming to this project, she obtained a postdoctoral fellowship from the CCK Foundation and also at Stanford for the DH Asia program. She completed her PhD in ENS Lyon in 2017, which deals with a spatial history of advertising in modern Shanghai. Let us welcome them both, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your warm welcome and presentation. I will do most of the talking, even though we work both on this presentation. We think that it's a better setup, but Cécile will be with me for the Q&A section as well. Let me first thank you for inviting us to this Rethinking the Datification of Culture in the Chinese World workshop. This is in fact the first public presentation that we are going to make of the Modern China biographical database. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to do this preliminary presentation. We decided to establish this database for a major reason. We want to develop an instrument for historical research on modern China that is tailored to the academic ecosystem as it has been developing in the last decade. Biographical databases are not new, and before them we had a print version of databases, mostly in the form of biographical dictionaries and all sorts of biographical resources. We focus in our work on modern China. That's this very short period in terms of the whole length of Chinese history, short but eventful, and also a time of drastic changes, transformation from all perspectives. So we start in 1830, basically because this is imperial China before the great challenges, in terms of external threats, internal disorders, wars, revolution, etc. And we stop at 1949. Of course, this is the end of Republican China. This is another drastic change. This is the foundation of the PRC. So this is our period of reference. And as I will explain, it's more than that, but this is our period of reference. Now, as historians, we focus on events, we focus on actions, but we also focus very much on actors. There is no history without actors. And very often we need information on these actors. In some cases, just to have some information. In some cases, it's central because we built our whole case study, for instance, on a group of people. So these instruments, dictionaries, and now databases, absolutely essential. But as I said, we have moved now from print to digital in 3 steps in a way, because we move from, we can see the migration of all our historical materials from print to images, and now from images to full text. And this includes, it started with academic papers, books, etc., but now it includes newspapers. It includes all sorts of, I would call, source materials. I will go into more details about that. In designing MCBD, in fact, we followed 2 basic principles. The first was not to reinvent the wheel, because there is no point in doing something that people have done before us or about other countries, other societies. So we actually brought together a whole group of experts, historians, all sorts of profiles, to think about biographical databases. Cécile, for instance, did a full review of the existing databases 2 years ago when we started the project.
As exhausted as I could. Maybe you can show the interface, no? I don't know. You have a
not
later? Okay, sorry.
Not yet, not yet. So this is what you see on the slide is in fact the public page of MCBD, and I will explain why it looks like this.
But we cannot see it. You didn't share your screen, I think.
Do you see my screen?
We see a slide with the project abstract and also a photograph and also the sponsoring institutions.
Okay,
oh, sorry.
So this is correct. So first principle, not to reinvent the wheel, and so we did our homework. That's what I meant to say. We really examined all the different kinds of possibilities, technologies, approach, etc. Second principle, we wanted to establish MCBD on a robust system with a proven record of database support, and of course with a large user base. We didn't want to start programming and reinventing something that would not really be reliable. It needs to last over time. This is the essential aspect. And for this, in fact, we decided to go for, so this is a search interface, which is a basic one, the public one, and I will explain why it's like this, but we have a much more advanced version. We decided to go with HENRIOT by my colleague Yin Johnson in Australia. This is a database system designed by humanists and designed for humanists, and with a large, as I say, user base, and with a very responsive team. So this was our choice. We're not looking for the most advanced technologies, because the most advanced technology can be also sometimes kind of risky. So what does it contain at this stage? We've been injecting data, importing data, and this is what we have in terms of numbers. So as you can see, we cover about more than 75,000 individuals, 55,000 positions. So we have positions attached to these people, which means that we have more people than positions, as you can see, because we started from metadata, so we have more people than we have actual content. I could describe all of that: companies, institutions. Company statistic is about companies for which we have, capital, workforce, etc. Education means education degrees. Okay, and observation is a very specific field that we have introduced. The database is centered on individual actors. The actor is the core element of the database, to whom all the various pieces of information are gathered and compiled. We include in the database any individual active in China in the period I referred to, whatever the duration of the presence of the life of the person. It can be someone who was in China for a few years. It can be someone who spent his or her whole life in China. We take both Chinese and non-Chinese, as I will explain. Initially, our central target are the elites, but mostly, I would say, apart from the fact that we work on the elites, it's obvious that it's far more easier to collect biographical information on elites than on the other groups. But in fact, as we process the documentation, we will and we are including people who do not belong to the elites. So the database is really for anyone active in China in that period. As I said, we include Chinese and non-Chinese. This is something that's particular to this period. It doesn't mean that there were no non-Chinese in China before, in Imperial China. By Chinese, we understand this in the broad sense of the word, that's all individuals born and raised within the geopolitical entity recognized as China, okay, which means both Han and non-Han. This is what I mean by Chinese. And by non-Chinese, it's basically individuals from other countries. In plain terms, you would say foreigners who worked in China, who settled in China, but also foreigners who actually were born in China. We have foreigners who spent, 3-4 generations in China. So this is what we have at this stage in terms of content. We're adding materials and data regularly. How do we envision this database? Well, one of the reasons we decided to establish this database that modern China requires, well, let's say, raises some challenges when you want to work on this period. First, we have sources, plenty of sources in multiple languages. Again, you could say, yes, true also of Imperial China. If you think of, materials in Manchu, materials in Mongol, materials in Chinese, but it's quite different because then you have both Chinese and then materials in English, in German, in French, and etc. And there's a lot, not just books, but also archives. So we cannot study China depending on the topic. You cannot study modern China without taking into account these sorts of material. I should also, of course, mention Japanese. It's not just the language, it's the types, forms of language. Publishing a newspaper is not the same as writing a diary, is not the same as compiling a directory, and etc. And of course, in these non-Chinese materials, the names of people, the names in general, people, locations, institutions, etc., is rendered in many forms, translations, transliterations, all sorts of transliterations. So if you say use a publication of 1925, or you use archives of 1925, you will find names that nobody's familiar with nowadays. Of course, the big names like Wang Shikai, Jiang Qishi, Chiang Kai-shek is always easy. But usually you get down to less important people. In the Chinese case, it may appear simpler because there would be apparently less ambiguity. In fact, it's not true. It's not true for many reasons. And one of the reasons that the Chinese at the time had several names, as we know, and they use the zi, they use the ming, etc. And in fact, sometimes, as I will give a complete example, they use the two alternatively. And it's not always, again, it's evident with famous people, but much less with the lesser important. So apart from what you can see here, the major tables, so it is a database with tables. There's nothing really innovative in that sense. But where we are, I believe, making a breakthrough in terms of a new type of database is that we try to connect as much as possible the information in the database with the original source. This is a great advantage of working with digital materials, and especially with the press. We can extract a lot of items from the press, and so we can always maintain the link or we try to maintain the link between the data on a person and the original source, so that as a historian or as a user of the database, then you can always double check, or you can go to the whole paper where this information was taken. Another, I think, innovative approach is that, the title of this workshop is datification. Okay. And in fact, not everything can be turned into data. As a historian, I've been confronting this issue many times. We take notes, we all take notes. And if we take note, it means that we necessarily need more than just data. So we're trying to combine the two perspectives. So most of the content is data, single item in a data feed, but we created a feed we call observations. What are observations? Observations are elements that are extracted from a source document. Usually it's a sentence. It's a piece of information that you cannot reduce to just a single term or even two terms, but it gives you content that, well, you can process later on as data, but basically it will remain as a database as an information. And as we compile the observation, it produces a lot of information or biographical information on a given individual. So how do we generate data for this database? There are two ways to do it. One, of course, is to do it manually. You take a source, any source, whatever, and you type data into the database. We can do it with MCVD. There's no problem. But this is not the way we work mostly. As you will see, it's a very complex database, lots of feeds. If we do that by hand, we would need an army. So basically, we import data. We import data from spreadsheets, either data prepared in the course of research on a case study, now or before. We all have files. It's very easy to transform a spreadsheet into data for MCVD, or data extracted on purpose by us from specific sources, such as the one that you are seeing now. Mostly dictionaries, directories, newspapers, but also Wikipedia, internet sources, etc. So there's a wide range of possibilities, but we have these circles. We have a core circles of such books as biographical dictionaries, directories, and then a wider circle of elements like Wikipedia or internet sources. And of course, we have, as I said, the press. What you see here is precisely a very good example, because it will show you the complexity of doing this exercise. In fact, it's easy to extract information from digital sources. We have tools, and that's very efficient. We're all fascinated by text analysis and all that. But when it comes to extracting with accuracy and then splitting up the information into data that goes into a database, then it becomes much more complicated. Because when these books were edited and prepared, they were not thought for us digital scholars. They were thought for reading. They were designed for reading. And even when we transform them into full text, it's a challenge. So we process systematically certain sources, but as I come back to that, we also welcome contribution from outside. This is not for us, this is for the common good of research on China. The example I'm showing you now is a directory, Shanghai Shizhenzhi of 1947. As you can see, it comes from the Institute of Modern China at Academia Sinica. I must say that they shared with us the entire collection, metadata, full text, everything. It's a major contribution to our work. So on the left-hand side, you see the original page. Okay, you can read it. And on the right-hand side, this is the full text, which was done very carefully. It was retyped and everything. So it's very good. It really reflects the original. Now, when we implement our tools, well, even with a very advanced algorithms, this is what you get. This basically is already very good because you have the name of the people as they are in the text. Then you can extract where they were born, then their age, and then it becomes complicated because each record is different from each person. Sometimes they have 1 degree, 2 degrees, they went to 1 university, 2 universities, 3 universities. There is 1 job, 2 jobs, up to 39 different jobs, okay? So when you want to transform that, and of course, you all can read Chinese, you can see that all sorts of terms have been introduced that we do not need, but they are important, like 现任, 兼任, 增任, it's a 历任, etc. So you have to take that into account, and then of course you have the name of the institution, the position, etc. So we need to speed that up, and so this is where, of course, we have other tools to help us, and then you eventually comes to something like this, which is close to what we need, where you have only the name, then the province has been singled out, the birthplace has been singled out, the birth year has been recalculated. It's no longer the age. Then we have the first institution for education and the year, the degree, the place, etc. And the same with, as you can see here, institutions, position and position 1 and 2, etc. So it's not a simple process. It's really a complex process before we manage to have really clean data that can be used both first for analysis, because if you want to do historical analysis, you need to have clean data, and second, of course, to put that into it. Last example on this slide is, in fact, what I was mentioning, the issue of names. We process different sources. You take this one, that one, that one, that one, and you have hundreds and sometimes thousands of names. So, of course, for someone like Kong Xiangxi, and you see that, oh wait, I have Kong Yongzhi in another book, you can make the connection and say, okay, this is, and you can adapt. But and same with Yu Xiaqing. Most of the time, most books use the names at the top of the image, but many times you would also have these alternative names. It's really complex, and this is one of the major feature of MCBD, that we actually associate to each individual all his or her names, whatever the format, like TV song, Song Ziwen, etc., etc. And believe me, the Chinese at the time sometimes chose names that were really like Western names. And my best example that Cécile knows, because she met this person in her dissertation, was Louis Mason. Louis Mason. She thought he was an American. It's Lou Mason. Lou Mason. Okay, so this is exactly the sort of problem that we are addressing. Now let me stop sharing my slide here, because I would like to move to the actual database so that you can see. Oh my boy. Okay. Just a quick second. Okay. I believe that you can see my screen right now. So this is a database. As I said, the interface that we are proposing at this stage is very simple. We wanted to make this available to anyone as fast as possible, as early as possible. But in fact, we're going to implement a new system that will give you access exactly to the same access as we have, except that, of course, external user won't be able to edit the database unless they become part of the team. But we are completely aware that the whole value of a database is when you can do very complex and advanced queries and you can export your data. All the data that we have is being made available. Apart from the access here, we dump the whole set and we put it on Zenodo. So it can always be downloaded and reused as an XML file. But in fact, it's not so useful because it's a very complex database. So the way this works, in fact, is that you can do queries like here. If I use, for instance, so you have immediately the information. So you have the individual coping when, and then everything that's related to him. Okay. If you select him, you can view where he was born. In this case, he was born in Shanghai. Of course, it's displayed by default on the contemporary maps. And you also have automatically a timeline of every information that we have on him. Okay. So it's not just that you can see. So this is his record. So you say coping when. As you can see, you have, for instance, this other transliteration. You have also his other names. You have another way he was designated, etc. You have the basic information, and then everything that's related to his education, anything related to his positions in the course of his career, and of course, at the end, you have the sources that we used for him. Now, we can also do more advanced searches. And what I'd like to show you here is one of the features that we have. I'm sorry. As I said, we want to link as much as possible the data to the sources. So here we have Sumo, okay, another important figure of the Republican period. Same kind of information, okay? But here, as you can see at the bottom, we have these observations, okay? So this is what I was telling you, that sometimes we can extract information that's still very useful. We believe it's very useful to compile this information chronologically as observations. You can see the nature of the source. It's a newspaper article. Here, in fact, we use just the title of the article. And you can, if you click, then you can have access directly, provided that you have the subscription. You have access directly to the article. Can you see the article in here? Because it moved to another window. Yes? Okay. So this is a major thing that we're providing, is that whenever we can, and this is very good with the ProQuest collection because it's structured in a way that each document has an ID, and so we can connect its linked data, each individual's and each observations about the individuals to the original source. We could do the same in Chinese, except that, let me show you. So I search another figure, Yumingyu. It's not really important. Well, I want to show you that, again, we have about him observations. These observations were taken from the Shengpo. Okay, so it's fine. We have exactly the text from which it was extracted. As you can see, he was a member of some committee here. But if I click on this, unfortunately, I cannot display the link to the source for What reason? Very simple. Let's say that the producer or the owners of the Shempa do not provide, refuse to provide. We have the IDs. We have all the IDs of the individual articles in our database. There's no problem. But the public interface does not provide this. So you see a limitations here, which is frustrating. This is why turning to digital is fantastic, but we're far away from an ideal world. I also wanted to show you very quickly, and this will be my last example because I have only 2 minutes left. Sorry, save filter. So here I selected, of course, I didn't do it before, but I selected all the individuals from the Bowman Dictionary of Republican China, okay? And automatically, of course, I have these timelines, but automatically it also display on the map the birthplace of these individuals, okay? So we were processing the data with third-part software, but within MCBD, and this is one of the great advantages of URIS, you can search for information on individual and then immediately have a complete view by record, by timeline, etc. And of course, you can export. You can export. And this is something that we're going to create a kind of a public user group so that anybody can just register and then use the same features as we can. Now, let me finish on I would say, a call for, we'd call it contribute. Again, I want to repeat that we have predecessors in terms of creating databases. One of the best examples, undoubtedly, is CBDB created by Harvard. I say one of the best examples for one major reason, apart from the quality of the database, it's the fact that it's public. They are working for the common good, and this is a major reason a lot of people are using. And we want to do exactly the same for modern China, modern Chinese history, to create a reference. And if you are interested, if you have data and you are prepared to share this data, data has no value in itself. It's when you accumulate data that's really it takes it value. So please contact us. We, of course, recognize, acknowledge any contribution. We have a provenance feed to make sure that everybody is credited. But basically, my call is really for the community of modern China historians to contribute to this development. The project will run to its end in 2 years, as you said, Likhan, but in fact, the database will remain, and in fact, will migrate to a major academic institution to make sure that it continues over time, as at Harvard. It will not go to Harvard, but it will go to a major academic institution that we will unveil later on. Thank you, all of you, for your attention. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And especially for picking us, picking this workshop as the occasion for your debut public presentation on the MCDB. Let us collect questions in the chat box, and let us take 1 minute to do that. But for the time being, let me express, how wonderful it is to see the growth of this important resource, which is, like you say, for the common good and for openness of data.
Just let me add one sentence while we
sure.
wait for questions. It's just that we're doing the same in the spatial dimension. We're also developing a modern China geospatial database. We released maps of provincials, boundaries for Republican China, and very, very soon, I promise you, you will have another instrument dedicated to issues of spatial data for modern China.
So with the spatial data, I saw that there had just been a new public release, right?
Yeah.
And the two are connected. That's how it.
Yeah, the idea is to actually connect the birth locations and death locations to this geospatial database, so that automatically, as I showed you for the Bruman a moment ago, you can immediately display the data. Of course, you can export it and use it in QGIS or whatever, but we want to have within the database all the data and various possibilities of showing it also in the form of networks, for instance. But of course, within the database, it's always something that's like here, for instance, it's still
We welcome questions from the audience. Would anyone want to ask or make a remark on?
In the meantime, if I can add, you say we stopped in 1949. This is the basic timeline, but we also, since we trace the life trajectory of individuals over their entire life, it can, we have one guy who still is not dead yet. So
oh wow,
we are expecting to see when he will. We try to update the database, but no, this is for modern China, but we also envision to enlarge the scope to contemporary China as well, during the PRC and in Taiwan. So yeah, this is really open to a larger.
We cover the whole lifespan of individuals.
I see an initial question in the chat box, which is about collection of the sources, collecting the sources for scan-only materials. How do you convert them into searchable text, since OCR technologies are imperfect, right?
Yes, it is. No, the bulk of the materials have been digitized, such as I said, like the newspaper, we don't do it. But yes, we collect, we've been collecting periodicals, let's say, for instance, students' journals. We've been collecting a lot of these directories of associations, etc. And well, we try, usually we try to get high definition scans, and Stanford University has provided us with very good quality scans. And then we authorize with Abby Fine Reader, with Tesseract. And in fact, it's not that bad. It's pretty good. The issue is more. Yeah, the issue is sometimes more the structure of the book, of the page, than the quality of the characters. If the characters have been printing well, in fact, Chinese is not so difficult to authorize. So, I would say it's a small part of what we do. We do it for very focused, very special collections, but especially for Chinese materials. So, and there are then ways with algorithms, in fact, to clean up, segment, clean, and so to do a better work when we do the authorization.
And I guess a related question is, it has to do with whether the material is printed or sort of manuscripts, right? Handwritten. So it is, of course, much harder, I presume, for handwritten manuscripts.
Yes, I do not fully understand the questions about competing agendas.
Would Simon want to clarify on this question?
Yeah, I was just with working with different international partners, whether there is any when I say competing agendas, what they wanted for the outcome, or was everybody in equal agreement?
Yeah, there is more than competing agendas. It's always complex to have to make people work together when they are in different locations, different institutions, etc. But no, at least those who are working with us, like, as I said, for instance, the Institute of Modern History at Academia Sinica, have been extremely generous in working. And no, I've really, and this is genuine, no, I haven't felt any sort of thing like this. And in fact, Beyond our own project, there are other ERC projects. One of them is the one by Hilde de Wert. She did one previously, and she's a new one starting. And Hilde has always been very supportive, even though she works on a completely different period. I mean, at least among the scholars I've met in the field, I must say that they've shown more support than competition. I also to mention one of the forerunners of databases for biography, which is Marilyn Levine, who is a great scholar, and she was the first one to do something like that. And she's part of us. She contributes to what we do. And again, no, I think that people have understood that if we create something that's solid and good, then it will serve our interest as scholars.
Well, it's good to hear we all work together. It's great.
Well, this is really my belief. I really believe in sharing. You know, I've been running different web platforms, and I do believe that it doesn't make sense to keep things. It's very rare that you have a unique document that will allow you to make a revolution. We don't make revolutions, basically. We write books.
And would you like to say something about Kelly Liu's question in the chat box about the trend of digital data collection for historical research?
Oh, okay. This is
a broader, broader.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, you know, I do not oppose physical and digital, and I do not oppose traditional and modern and digital. My colleague Cécile has written a blog post on this. What kind of historians do you want to do? We have to be pragmatic. First, at least for those working on China, archives, given the nature of the document, will for a very long time, and probably forever for certain parts, always be physical archive. There's no way you can transform it. For one, I've been working with archives in China for 35 years, and I know that no technology will ever be possible to transform that. Second, there's an issue in the digital transformation. As you know, you cannot be sure that you get 100% of what was on the original document. And this is true of all of the methods that we use, including the newspapers and so on. So it's a fantastic advantage, and it's a great benefit. You can work with great strides when you process these digital sources, but one should never lose track of the fact that you may lose something. So you have to keep your site, maintain your sites on the original sources. It's more and more difficult, unfortunately, and especially for China now, which is digitizing its archives, are digitized. You can read them on screen in the archives, but you have no longer access to the original. And this is terrible, because sometimes you really need to have this. But I do believe that the bulk of our resources as scholars will turn digital. And probably, most likely, the archives will be the last standing chunk of documentation that, in many cases, we will have to read, not probably as physical paper, but as images. And yeah, if it's well done, it's fine. But it's not well done, and unfortunately, I must say, this is not the case in China. They turn everything black and white, and yeah, you lose something, definitely, and this is a problem.
Does anyone has any quick final questions before we wrap up? Mindful of the time.
Yeah, and do not worry, archives remain the staple of historians.
We're stuck with it. Yes, we'll be stuck with it. Yeah. On that note, many thanks to Krishan and Cécile. And I hope you could leave us a contact in case anyone would want to be in touch and contribute to your wonderful database.
We'll send the link to the database with the contact information too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we'll leave you to your other event that you'll be hosting, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you all. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Now let us